Hey everyone, and welcome to Sonnet Nuts and Bolts, a screen recording in which I will go over everything you need to know about sonnets. Okay? At the end of this review, you're going to be able to take a quiz on the sonnet nuts and bolts, so make sure you review anything you need to in preparation for that quiz. Additionally, if you go into Canvas right now, if you haven't done it already, there is a guided note sheet that you'll want to fill out as you go along with this presentation. Okay, so let's talk about the sonnet. Before we even get there, what you need to know about a sonnet in general is that it's a very famous type of poem. And when I say type of poem, I mean like a haiku or an acrostic. Now, starting out on our notes here, Francesco Petrarch was the inventor of the sonnet. Look at him. Good-looking guy, right? Now, most of Petrarch's sonnets feature the mysterious Laura. Okay, so I've just given you the first couple notes there that it's Francesco Petrarch and he's the inventor of the sonnet, and most of his sonnets feature the mysterious Laura. But I want to tell you a little bit about Laura because it's kind of cool. He wrote a lot of sonnets. It's like they call them sonnet series when it's a lot of sonnets. And he wrote like 300 and some. I'm making up that number, but it was seriously 300 and something, somewhere around there. And most of these sonnets talk about this woman named Laura. Now, Laura was a noblewoman in Italy in the 1300s, and she was married to some other dude. Okay, now we don't know much about her because, again, this was 700 years ago, but it's believed that she was this noblewoman who was married to some other guy and that Petrarch just loved her from afar. Nobody ever knows if they actually ever got to have an affair or things like that, but it's kind of cool and also kind of creepy because when you read some of the poems too, he talks about watching her from afar. So, you can kind of think in your mind like, oh man, was he stalking her? Was this like a you kind of thing? Or were they just having an affair together? Interesting, or kind of sadly, Laura actually will die before Petrarch does. And he has a whole bunch of sonnets where he talks about how he'll never be able to write again because the woman he loved has died. So that's that. Okay. Now, the Italian sonnet or Petrarchan sonnet has 14 lines. Okay, remember he was the inventor of the sonnet, so he was Italian. So you can either call the sonnet he invented Italian or Petrarchan. Okay, every single sonnet will have 14 lines. So just remember that every sonnet has 14 lines. Now, every sonnet also has iambic pentameter. Now, let's break that down a little. Meter is that rhythm that you have in poetry. It's like the da-da, 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 da-da. Songs have meter too, okay? So when you're thinking about raps or songs, they have meter as well, and it's that rhythm that's created. Now, you can have certain types of meter, and we have that here, iambic pentameter, okay? Pentameter, blah, okay? And iamb is a foot, okay? So that's a foot or a grouping of syllables, okay? It's 2 syllables. Don't pay attention to this right here. It's 2 syllables in this case. It's the dump. Okay, that's the foot. And there are 5 of those. So we have 2 syllables and we have that 5 times. So we have 2 syllables times 5. That means it's 10 syllables. Okay, so a line of iambic pentameter has 10 syllables that goes da dump, da dump, da dump, da dump, da dump. And down here it says it sounds like a heartbeat. And that's what it does, right? It says the dump, da dump, da dump. Okay, so if I were reading a line of poetry, I might say something like, I am talking to you about this song. Okay, that's iambic pentameter. Okay, now Italian or Petrarchan sonnets have a rhyme scheme, and it's called the Italian sonnet rhyme scheme. And what that means is that it's broken up into 1 octave, and that means 8 lines, and 1 sestet, and that means 6 lines. Octave, right? Octagon, okay? 8 lines and 6 lines. And what we have here is ABBA, ABBA. So it might be a rhyme like if you have fly here, it might be fly, and then it would be go, no, buy, sigh, blow, show, why. Okay, so that's your rhyme scheme. And then the sestet has 2 options, CD, 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 or CDE, CDE. Now, in between these two, you want to know that sonnets aren't usually broken up. Sometimes they are, but they usually aren't broken up into different verses. Okay, so you'll have them all smushed together, but the rhyme scheme changes here, and that rhyme scheme tells you there's a shift, or what's called a volta. So make sure you have that on the notes, a shift or a volta, and that comes between. So in Petrarch's case, he might have the first 8 lines where he's talking about how Laura is dead, Laura is dead, Laura is dead, Laura is dead, and then his tone or what he's talking about or how he's talking about it shifts, and he goes from saying Laura's dead to down here in the last 6 lines saying I shall never write again. Okay, so you have something up here, like sometimes you'll have a really happy sonnet for first 8 lines, and then the tone will change and it'll be sad, and that's called a volta or a shift. Okay, you'll see that here. I wrote that down in here as well. Well, I didn't write this down. I took this from WikiHow, of course. Okay, but then you have your 8 lines, then you have your 6 lines, and there's the volta. Okay, and you can see how that changes. You'll often notice it because it has something like but at the beginning of it. So try to remember that. Okay, now we have William Shakespeare. He's the most famous sonnet writer by far. Okay, sorry Petrarch, but most kids don't even know you today. I don't know why I almost said college kids. I meant high school kids. Neither do, right? But you do know William Shakespeare. Okay, also a good-looking guy. Okay, he's the most famous sonnet writer. His sonnets are also 14 lines. He also uses iambic pentameter. So again, remember, what makes a sonnet is the fact that it has 14 lines and it has that da-dum, 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 da-dum meter. Okay, they also all have rhyme schemes. Now that's where it breaks apart here between Shakespeare and Petrarch. Now you'll notice here it's called the Shakespearean sonnet, but it's also called the English sonnet. Again, because Shakespeare's from England, he's English. So you have 2 names here, Shakespearean or English. Okay? Now, if you ever spoke to someone and they were speaking in Italian, you realize that a lot of their words end in vowel sounds. And I hate to do this, but let's think of all the words we know that are Italian, like rigatoni, right? Ravioli, okay? Fettuccine, right? Okay, I hate to use those words, but those are words we know in Italian. A lot of vowel sounds. So it's actually relatively easy to rhyme in Italian. That's why in some of these you might only have 4 or 5 rhyming sounds. It's not that easy in English, right? We know this. We've tried to rhyme in English, right? Okay, so Shakespeare, what he had to do is he had to change up that rhyme scheme because it's not as easy to rhyme in English. So for the Shakespearean or English sonnet, he then went from octaves and sestets to 3 quatrains, which is groups of 4 lines, and 1 couplet, which is a group of 2 lines. Okay, so his rhyme scheme here is A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G G. And then we have the Petrarchan rhyme scheme, and let me go back a couple, which is either going to be A B B A, A B B A, C D C D C D, or A B B A, A B B A, C D E, C D E. Okay, you have 2 options there. Okay, we go from that over here to A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, G G. Again, easier to rhyme. Okay, you will be expected to memorize those rhyme schemes, so start to think of those, because I always think, you know, we have Abba Abba, C D C D C D, or Abba Abba, C D E C D E. And the reason I say you'll have to remember them is because you'll have to identify them. So start thinking about, if I see a sonnet that starts Abba, I know it's Italian. Okay. Now, you'll see here they call the volta over here a poetic turn. Well, that volta, or in English, the turn, okay, comes down here. There's still a shift over here between line 8 and 9, okay? So over here in the Petrarchan, you have a shift, or what's called in Italian a volta, that comes here, that we talked about, that shift here. You'll still have a slight shift over here, but the biggest turn, and we call it a turn in English, will come right before the rhyming couplet. So, for example, some of Shakespeare's sonnets, he'll talk about being in love, being in love, being in love, and then he'll talk about a complication of being in love down here in the last quatrain. And then he often does like the moral of the story, okay, or a theme. So, if you ever have to evaluate the theme in an English sonnet, look to the last two lines because usually that tells you what the theme is. Okay, and then we have Edmund Spenser. He's just another sonnet writing dude. He also writes English sonnets, okay? So they're also called English sonnets, but he specifically writes Spenserian sonnets. And I have a typo there. I apologize for that typo. I'm terrible as an English teacher. Okay, so he writes Spenserian sonnets. They have a different rhyme scheme. I'm not going to tell you what that rhyme scheme is because you don't have to know it. Okay, so we're just going to skip that rhyme scheme. But we will read some of his sonnets, so I wanted to mention him to you. He is a contemporary of Shakespeare, though, so just know they were writing at the same time. He's 12 years older. He dies a little bit before Shakespeare as well. He dies pretty young, but they're writing at the same time. But ouch for you, Edmund. Most of the credit for the English sonnet goes to William Shakespeare. Okay, so now go back over your notes. They are in Canvas. Make sure you have everything filled in. And then just go through and make sure you know the nuts and bolts, the details about what every sonnet's like. When you're ready, take the quiz in Canvas. Make sure to study. And then over the next few days after this, we're going to go and review some specific sonnets. Okay, if you have any questions, reach out.